It's a Tuesday morning, and it is great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Welcome in. As I told you yesterday, taking you behind the scenes, John did a great job manning the ship here at KCMO because Mark is out on set with a very famous television show that now we can confirm based on the news stories is Ted Lasso. We'll get to more of that coming up here in just a little bit. I am on a remote location visiting family and enjoying some time as well, and happened to spend some time yesterday afternoon with Bill O'Reilly, who made sure to tell John Anthony that he said hello. So, John, Bill O'Reilly says hello to you as we get it going on a Tuesday morning.
Well, we share musical reference points, of course.
I told him that you love the 60s and 70s musical obscure references that he brings up once in a while. So
Absolutely.
he got a kick out of that.
Absolutely.
Oh, gosh. But he did say to tell this audience on KCMO that of all the radio stations he does and he's involved with, and there's a lot of them, there are a lot of legacy radio stations that have gone into the crapper around this country. That's sad, but it's a reality of the industry, the business. Just some radio stations, which have some all-time call letters, have not maintained their brand. And one thing that he continued to reiterate during our conversation yesterday is that the KCMO brand is strong as he sees it nationally, as a guy who does a lot of radio and a lot of TV. And he was very proud of the work that we are all doing here, and he loves this audience. So he's looking forward to coming on again soon. He's got Confronting Evil, his next book, coming out in September, and he will be on KCMO to talk about that when that book does launch. But he's had a lot of success, obviously, with these books as of late. And it was great to see him yesterday, catch up, and we'll talk more about that throughout the morning. I did not get a guarantee, though, John, on getting him out to Kansas City for a Chiefs game and some barbecue. I worked hard on that throughout the meeting.
Not yet.
But I could not. I felt like I was on a date. I just couldn't close it for a second follow-up. Couldn't get it done. But you don't want to seem too desperate either, right? You got to kind of play it cool. You can't overplay your hand on this stuff.
That's cool, Bill. Whatever, you know.
Yeah,
whatever.
I'll call Hannity. It's fine if
Chiefs
you can't
game,
make it.
Current, whatever. We'll go with current. That might make you make a choice.
I was trying hard, but we'll see how it plays out. But he certainly
diplomacy
was.
Doesn't always. Diplomacy is a slow, it's a graceful thing.
It's going to take some time, but either way, great to see him, and we had an outstanding time. And he said hello to this audience. Now, some big news came out yesterday. I'm just not sure how big the news actually is. And that is the Trump administration releasing documents on Martin Luther King Jr. Now, a part of this feels like a diversion away from all the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. That was my initial reaction. But yesterday, more than 6,000 documents and nearly 250,000 pages were posted to the website of the National Archives late on Monday afternoon. The administration is saying, hey, this is great. This is all about our transparency that we promised on the campaign trail. I don't know anybody who's been waking up day after day after day being like, I've got to see the MLK Files. I've got to see what's missing here. I want to know more. I just don't know that person. Maybe they exist. But this is not something that is going to be make or break for this administration and their success or their failures. But fine, they release it. That's totally cool. The media, though, has a predictable meltdown over all of this because their insinuation was that this was simply done for Trump to basically get the story off of Epstein, and he also did this against the will of the family. And that's how the media chose to cover all this. Now, it doesn't really matter what the family wants here when it comes to trying to get all the information out there in front of the American people. While I'm not necessarily fascinated by it, I have not seen, and maybe there's something in these 240,000 pages that shows that James Earl Ray was not acting alone, or he was part of some larger grandiose conspiracy in some organization we don't know anything about. But something tells me if you go back 60 years at this point, you're not going to find a lot there, because if it was part of some larger cover-up, you think that's still sitting in documents somewhere 60 years later with the thousands and thousands of people who have worked for the FBI over that time? I mean, what golden nugget do you expect to be sitting out there in these MLK files? So as much as I'm like sitting here and saying, fine, release them, whatever, I don't believe there's going to be a lot of there. The media's coverage of it was so predictable and utterly embarrassing. So there was a lot of focus from CNN, the Associated Press, on the family's opposition to all this. The New York Times wrote a similar piece, and here's part of what the New York Times wrote. They wrote, the King family has expressed concern that the release would focus attention on Dr. King's well-documented sexual indiscretions. They also raised worries about whether doing so would feed a revisionist, negative view of a man who has come to embody the fight against systemic racism, and the call for a robust federal defense of minority groups that Mr. Trump has largely moved to reverse since taking office. Oh, for crying out loud.
Way to dump yourself there.
Yeah. I don't want to do that. Garner's got the reins there on the board. Mark's out. I don't want to do that to him. But you have got to be kidding me with this. First off, Donald Trump, if we're being fair here, cannot be the guy to embarrass anybody else for their sexual indiscretions. Okay? Let's just throw that out there first and foremost. That's not going to be Trump's motive against anybody, whether he likes them or doesn't like them or agrees with them or doesn't agree with them. And the second half of that, you've got a guy who just won the presidency as a Republican with the most diverse coalition of Republican voters since Ike, since our own, Kansas's Dwight Eisenhower. Okay, and this notion of, white guy Republican wants to make historic black figure look bad and wants to, reverse what he pushed for, a robust defense of minority groups, that is absurd. The only thing that Trump has largely moved to reverse since taking office is the DEI nonsense, which actually is everything that, in large part, MLK was fighting against. Judging a man based on his character, not his skin color. It's the left that has been pushing for a world and a society that is looking at you and judging you largely based on your skin color. Mm-hmm. MLK was the one who wanted no part of that.
Exactly.
So I read this in the New York Times, John, and I sat there and I started shaking my head. But it was such a predictable insinuation to come from a newspaper like this on what the release of the MLK files was all about in their eyes.
Just a personal observation I had noted over the passing anniversaries of MLK Day in the last few years, especially since George Floyd and BLM. They suddenly weren't quoting the speech there at the end about being judged by the content of your character. Those highlights weren't being played in the highlights here in the last few years, oddly enough. I wonder why.
I would wonder why as well. And when you look at this story and you look at this release, I don't think that there's a lot that we're going to be talking about with the MLK files in the weeks to come. But the way that the media has spun this release as somehow Donald Trump wanting to make a historical black figure look bad is so transparently pathetic when it comes to what they're trying to accomplish. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio. Well, we know that Mark is continuing to film around Kansas City as an extra for a very popular television show. We got confirmation yesterday that Ted Lasso Season 4 has begun filming in Kansas City. There were sightings of stars all around town yesterday. You may have seen those on social media. And we'll share with you what we know, where Mark is, and what he is doing as an extra. Plus, Mayor Lucas looking to do a victory lap because, of course, all coming up on 95.7 FM, KCMO. Production for the fourth season of Ted Lasso is underway in Kansas City. In a post yesterday on X, Apple CEO Tim Cook shared a little trailer for Ted Lasso Season 4 and teased the show's Kansas City filming on social media. Now, the video is not great. It's 20 seconds of mostly just little bumper music, so there's no point in playing it on the radio. It's not going to sound all that good. But we can now confirm, since this has been put out there by Apple and it is now basically known to the world, our man, Mark Van Sickle, is somewhere right now in Kansas City as a stand-in filming for Ted Lasso. This, of course, was something we started on the air a few weeks ago when the applications were being accepted for extras and stand-ins on what was being dubbed an unnamed television show that was filming in Kansas City. Well, we told Mark to apply. He did, and he actually got the gig. And he's now on day 3, and something tells me Mark wishes he was back here in the studio because he is working very long days, and they're not paying him great, as far as I can tell, based on what he's told us. But we've been in this group chat, myself, John, Keatsman, and Mark, and we're trying to get a read on where Mark is. And last night, he didn't text us until well after 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
When he said, I just got off the set. We have to have our phones in airplane mode when we're on the set. And he's been on the set basically 12 to 15 hours a day for now Sunday, Monday, and now he gets set for day 3 on Tuesday, John. I am not envious of what he's doing right now.
See, and they do the torture thing. He was at a barbecue restaurant, right, yesterday?
Yeah.
I believe. Couldn't eat any of it. I would hate
yeah.
that. I would hate that.
He's going, I think I saw on social media, he was at Gates. They had the show there filming at Gates. And poor Mark, I mean, the guy, he's such a team player. He's such a good sport about this whole thing. And he's at Gates, and he's with the whole crew. And as a stand-in, you just got to sit there and smell Gates all day. I mean, that just sounds like absolute torture for the poor guy. But I know he's not alone. There's a lot of other folks who are out there doing this whole stand-in extra routine around Kansas City. And I can't get a read on the kind of person who, first off, can take off from their job. I mean, we're letting Mark do this because it's become part of the show. We didn't really have a choice. I mean, we played this up on the air. He got the gig. What am I going to say? Oh, sorry, Mark, you can't go do it. I mean, we had to kind of figure out a way to make this work, but we're in a different line of work from most people. When you're talking about someone who's able to basically take off 4 days in a row from their job and then go work 12 to 15-hour days, who is that person? Mark's like a unique figure. Unless you own your own business or something, who's actually going to be able to pull that off? And then it's like, well, if it's a bunch of people who don't have jobs and aren't currently working, I know that people are sometimes out of work in between gigs, and I understand that. But if you're talking about deadbeats who just don't work, then how good of a stand-in or an extra are they possibly going to be anyway when you're talking about 12 to 15-hour days? I know it's not heavy lifting and you're not digging ditches, but there's still a lot that goes into doing that work that is monotonous, that's repetitive, and that, honestly, I would think after a while would be incredibly boring. My personality would not do well as an extra or a fill-in in this show, as just some guy in the background who's got to sit there and basically be told by some producer, stand in there again, let's do it, take 52, John. I would have zero interest in any of this.
Can we get that guy back there a fidget spinner or something, you know? One more time, dude, and you're out of here.
I might just be spending too much time around toddlers these days, but my attention span for any of this stuff is just total garbage, and I would have zero capabilities of doing what some random guy told me to do for a 50-second straight time. Mayor Lucas hyping this up, as you would imagine. The mayor posting on social media, Mayor Lucas celebrates the production of the beloved Apple TV Plus series, Ted Lasso, in Kansas City, marking another major victory for the city's rapidly expanding film industry and bringing one of television's most celebrated shows to the heartland. I would like to see the evidence of the rapidly expanding film industry. I would hope that for Kansas City. Listen, I want to see more of every business in Kansas City. But if we're being honest here, I mean, this show is here because of Jason Sudeikis being from here,
right.
helping develop the show, and creating a storyline that has deep Kansas City ties. Let's not give our government an ounce of credit for Ted Lasso being in Kansas City. They deserve zero credit. Let's just be very clear. Quinton Lucas, this city council, and anybody who is employed in economic development who wants to pat themselves on the back, Port KC, I don't care who it is. They deserve absolutely no credit for having anything to do with Ted Lasso being in Kansas City. And any insinuation that they deserve credit for Ted Lasso being in Kansas City is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they don't deserve any of it, John.
There is a good independent film scene going on here, but it's kind of two different things, parallel. It's like I can't go buy a car off of the dealership lot and then go out to the Kansas Speedway and expect to win, a race out there. They're kind of slightly different things, although parallel.
Yeah, and that's cool. I mean, if we've got that independent film scene that's growing, that's expanding, and there are benefits to independent filmmakers operating in Missouri and operating in Kansas City, I'm all about that. That's great. But the notion that the city has some program or some film tax credit that I know a lot of states do, that somehow led Ted Lasso to coming down to the plaza and filming at Gates. And Mark sent us a text of the skyline this morning at about 6 a.m. after he was filming again. He was starting filming at 6 o'clock this morning. The idea that that has anything to do whatsoever with this city government is a comical assertion and one that no one in government should take an ounce of credit for. One thing that Quinton Lucas does have going for him, regardless of what you think about him as the mayor and the job that he has done, his timing could not be better. He has been the mayor during, obviously, a historic Chiefs run and at a time when Kansas City has become cool because of Paul Rudd, Jason Sudeikis, the list goes on some of the celebrities out there who have deep ties to this community. But that has nothing to do with the people in charge in this town. Coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio, an update on the HR lady from the Coldplay fiasco. Can she actually sue? We'll get to it next. When's the last time something this good happened for a band that, yes, still gets worldwide attention and can sell out arenas, but hasn't really been mainstream in quite some time? I'm not sure I've seen it in my lifetime. So Coldplay, of course, getting a tremendous amount of free publicity after their concert went viral last week, thanks to the Astronomer former CEO Andy Byron, who has since resigned, and the HR executive Kristen Cabot were seen having a nice grand time at the concert last week. Problem is, they were both married to other people as they were swooning at Gillette Stadium just outside of Boston. So Andy Byron has resigned his post as the head of Astronomer, but the HR executive, Kristen Cabot, is only on leave. And she has not been given the boot over what legal experts claim are liability concerns. They claim it's not so easy to dump employees just because of ugly headlines. There have been multiple stories on this over the last 24 hours or so, and the suggestion is that she may be in line for a lawsuit against Astronomer if they fire her exclusively over what happened at the concert. The question is, what if the company and HR greenlit what happened to Coldplay? And there's a supporting paper trail of these two going together to a concert. So we're waiting now to kind of figure out how exactly these two ended up at the concert. What does this HR executive know? What kind of paper trail does she have where she could obviously open the company up to some liability and some kind of a lawsuit? And frankly, to me, it's part of the issue we have culturally with this lawsuit culture in America in 2025. where everybody is looking to point the finger and blame somebody else and figure out how they can get a payday based on their own stupid actions. That's the world that we live in. So Kristen Cabot took this job at Astronomer in November of last year, so she has not even been there a year. She's been there 8-9 months, right? And she ends up apparently having some affair, extramarital relationship with the CEO. And then they go viral at the concert last week. But she has not lost her job yet. And it's because of potential legal ramifications that the company is trying to protect itself from. Unless there's something shocking that comes out that the company greenlit all this, there are too many people around the company who knew about this, and basically the company is partially to blame. I don't know what the argument could be against Astronomer in two consenting adults agreeing to go to a concert together, having plenty of PDA, that's public display of affection, for those of you that may not know that acronym, and then getting caught on the Jumbotron. How that's at all the fault of the company, I don't know. But at a time when everyone is looking for that big payout and everybody is looking to sue, and we have an overabundance of attorneys looking for their next big payday, it doesn't shock me that Astronomer is obviously taking this thing very seriously and is making sure that they have all their ducks in a row before they fire her. That being said, they should be able to fire her for just having ugly headlines. I mean, you tell me, what's the case at 913-408-7957 to not fire Kristen Cabot for bringing shame and embarrassment to the company and putting the company in a worldwide headline that they frankly wanted no part of. The entire world now knows the company Astronomer. Let's be honest. I had not heard of this company, John, until this story broke last Thursday. Never heard of them, knew nothing about them, could not have told you what they did.
I guess
now
they do
they're
apps,
a household name.
Yeah, they do apps.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I can't figure out what her play would be. It's like, why wouldn't you want this to just go away? You know, there's nothing like calling more attention to it and putting yourself out there, right?
If you can make money, John, people do stupid things for money. That's the only conclusion I can come to here.
I suppose.
There was an attorney, Douglas Wigdor, who theorized to the New York Post that there could be more details about the relationship which the public is not aware of. He said that could be a factor as to why Cabot has not publicly left the company. They also wrote here that results of the internal probe could determine what the company does with Cabot. Maybe there's more to the story from her. Is there some type of settlement potentially coming? She could bring a claim of sexual harassment. That is possible as well here. Does she claim that the CEO was hitting on her and as someone who was working under her?
Hey, the boss.
Well, yeah,
what
exactly.
Hey, what,
I'm the new HR exec. He comes on to me. What am I supposed to do? How do I handle this? I mean, there is a whole can of worms that can come out of this fiasco that she may try to play. I mean, people do weird things when they're trying to save themselves, their marriage, their family. I mean, they will go to extreme lengths. I'm not defending any of it. I'm just saying that may be why she has not been canned yet.
This is kind of like the Epstein thing. Maybe there's less to it than we think. Everybody likes to say release everything, but then everybody defines everything as whatever they define it as, right? Based on what they've heard,
too.
Right? So everybody says, "Oh, they're having an affair." Did they? I don't know, but certainly in that moment, to your point, maybe she makes that case.
Maybe she does. Maybe this was like a first kind of date situation. We don't really know, right? Like, we don't know if this was the first time they were technically out on their own and doing something together and they just got busted, or if this was the apex of a multi-month affair that was happening. Who really knows, to your point? So on the text line, 913-408-7957, a lot of you are chiming in saying this is clearly victim mentality by her. That's where my head goes. that she's now trying to figure out how to play the victim in this whole thing, because victim mentality is basically what everyone sadly tries to achieve in 2025, no matter how powerful and rich you are. If you can get out of a situation that prevents you from having to look in the mirror and blame yourself, you somehow figure out how to claim victim status. I agree with that. Pete, on the text line, my question is, why did they freak out and play hide and seek? Why not just play it cool and wave? Because no one in that moment prepares to how they're going to react to be seen on the Jumbotron. Nobody does that. You're not with somebody that you're not supposed to be with, aggressively holding on to them and saying, if we get busted on the Jumbotron, what are we going to do? It's just because there's that 1 in 50,000 shot that you actually end up on the Jumbotron. When you're comfortable, and clearly both of them were comfortable in that setting, you're not thinking 2 steps ahead. Maybe you should, but then again, if you were thinking 2 steps ahead, you wouldn't allegedly be having an affair, right? If you were actually thinking 2 steps ahead.
Touché.
So in hindsight, sure, if they had just waved to the cameras, no one would have known about this. That is true. But it's one of those things you don't think about. It doesn't cross your mind when you're at a concert. You might have had a couple of drinks. You know, you're with this person you're probably not supposed to be with, and no one expects you to be seen publicly. And then, boom, there you are.
Yeah.
So I just think it's human nature when you get caught to react that way. And no one's planning to be caught in that manner. And then now with the internet and social media, this stuff goes viral, and it's been seen hundreds of millions of times around the internet, John.
Their immediate reaction is the big tell, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It was the dead giveaway. On the text line, Pete, how about it's none of our business and who cares? I don't know. It's only the most viral moment of 2025, hands down, and not even close. So I think that because of how this story has taken on a life of its own, you literally have ballparks now who are doing the Coldplay cam. This is the cultural and viral moment of 2025, leaving out politics and sports and things like that. This is it. And it happened last week, and that's why people can't get enough of this story. I mean, when you look at stories that are trending on social media, it's the latest layer to this Coldplay fiasco. That's what it's become. And, I'm not saying you have to like it, but it's the one water cooler moment away from politics and away from sports that we've had this year. It's been this story and this issue. The entire world knows about it. And that's rare to say in a media environment that is more fragmented than it's ever been in history. Coming up, the 6 at 6, top 6 stories that you need to know in the 6 o'clock hour on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Just when you thought there couldn't be more drama around Jackson County Executive Frank White, you've got it. After the Jackson County Election Board announced it was not preparing for an August 26th recall election, they are not moving forward with a recall election at the Jackson County Election Board or the Kansas City Election Board, despite the fact that the Jackson County Legislature set Tuesday, August 26th as the date to have this election to recall Frank White. This thing just gets deeper, and it gets worse for you, the Jackson County resident and taxpayer. It's great to be here. It's 7:06 on a Tuesday on KCMO Talk Radio. So Fox 4 had this feature piece yesterday. Good job, as always, by Jonathan Ketz, one of the few really good reporters here in Kansas City. So we knew that when the votes were confirmed to recall Frank White, the election boards had 60 days to figure out what date to put this thing on the ballot. The legislature confirmed it was going to be August 26th, that you would be able to go to the polls to vote on whether or not to recall or retain Jackson County Executive Frank White. Well, for the last, 3 weeks now, it's been nothing but crying and complaining from the Jackson County Election Board officials and the Kansas City Election Board officials. We don't have enough time. How are we going to turn this thing around in 60 days? Oh, my. The minute you say to bureaucrats, hey, guys, you got to do this and you got to do it by X date, they're like, oh, we don't have time for that. The whole world, not the whole world, Kansas City knew that the votes were coming to recall Frank White. The notion that the Kansas City Election Board or the Jackson County Election Board was somehow caught off guard by all of this and had no clue this was coming is such an embarrassment to common sense in this town. But I guess that's to be expected when you're talking about bureaucrats in Jackson County or in Kansas City. We all knew about this. We knew this was coming. We've been talking about this for months. They've been trying to gather these signatures, and they finally got to that, 42,000 signature number, which triggered the recall effort. So now you've got the Kansas City and Jackson County election boards who have already sued. But on the flip side, you've got multiple residents who are suing, and they're represented by attorney Phil Lavoda. And this guy apparently wants to be the next county executive. So you couldn't create more layers and more twists and turns in this story if you tried. But it also shouldn't be shocking. We are talking about Jackson County after all, aren't we? So on Monday, Jackson County and Kansas City election boards would not comment on camera. But the Jackson County Election Board Republican Director Tammy Brown confirmed that they are not preparing for an August 26th election. What some people want to see happen is for there to be an election on November 4th. That apparently is what Frank White wants, November 4th. Now, why would Frank White want a November 4th election? I'll tell you why. He believes he's got a better chance to get people out to vote to save his job in November than he does in late August. These special election dates when people aren't really paying attention will drive out those who are most enthusiastic about voting. Now, it's an odd year, so naturally in November of an odd year, people are not going to be as enthusiastic or really even knowing that there's something to go vote on. It's not a midterm. It's obviously not a presidential year. So just naturally, there's not going to be as much attention or as much knowledge about how you've got to go vote in November of an odd year. But it's Frank White's better chance to survive. A late August election is going to likely lead to his recall and to his boot from office as Jackson County executive. He's got a shot. I'm not saying it's a good one, but I'm saying there's a chance that for Frank White to try to save his skin, he's better off having this thing on a ballot in November. It gives him more time to get his supporters out to the polls, to even let them know that this recall vote is happening, which is something that I know we've talked a lot about it, but let's be honest, there's still people in town who just are totally unaware of what's happening around them. They don't realize that Frank White is potentially going to get booted from office, and Frank probably wants time to bring attention to this, to play the victim in this, and to drive some sympathy voters out his way. If this thing was held in a month, he'd be screwed. There would be absolutely no chance that Frank White would be able to save his job. November 4th gives him the opportunity to do that. But we still have to wait to see how some of these lawsuits play out. There's a court hearing soon in the case whether or not the Jackson County and the Kansas City election boards can go ahead and try to delay this thing. That hearing is set for Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. And a hearing in the case around the residents who are out there suing to get this thing finalized by August 26th have a hearing on August 1st. At this point, I don't see an August 26th vote happening. I would love to be wrong about that. But the county and the city election boards aren't doing anything. They literally have said, we're not doing this, we're suing. So I don't know how you can actually go out there at this point in time and force an election when the people in charge of the election aren't doing their job because they're filing lawsuits. And if you're on the side of we've got to recall Frank White, I think at this point, if you're willing to go ahead with November 4th, and Frank's side is willing to go ahead with November 4th, and the county and the city election boards are willing to go ahead with November 4th, then just set it and move on, and then run a campaign in the fall as to why he should be recalled. That would make much more sense at this point in time than fighting this thing in court, trying to get something on August 26th, and who knows what that leads to. Because I could see a world where Frank loses on August 26th, but then he sues on the back end where he's like, we couldn't get out absentee ballots, we couldn't do this, we didn't have enough polling locations, and then you get into this further tit for tat where his side claims it was basically an illegally held election. And that's the last thing you want to deal with. At this point, you've gone 7 years with Frank White. What the heck's another 2 months? If November 4th is the date, and I've been very sympathetic to the group trying to go ahead with the recall because of how poorly these property tax issues have been handled in this county. But at this point, another 2 months will do no damage to anybody. Get it done. Go on November 4th. If all parties agree, if the election board is on board, no pun intended, then move ahead with that date and get this thing over with and get this thing done with. The text line is 913-408-7957. Pete, that is the worst assertion of yours I've ever heard. We need this thing in August. Okay, well, how are you going to force it? And if it leads to more lawsuits, it's not going to be worth the multi-month headache. Remember, Frank is done November of 26 anyway. If you can guarantee he's done 1 year early and get the ball rolling on the county business and know that you're going to avoid further legal drama, just do it. You tell me what's happening between August 26th and November 4th that requires you to get rid of Frank White earlier. By what, 10 weeks? What? I mean, there's nothing that you would suggest Frank White could do to make the county worse in those 10 weeks. Nothing. So just go ahead with November 4th and move on. That's the play here for those that want to see Frank recalled. Coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM, a new conspiracy theory around Stephen Colbert's cancellation. We'll tell you about next on KCMO. Well, speaking of Bill O'Reilly, had a chance to get together with him yesterday. I'm on location visiting with family and got the chance to visit with Bill yesterday afternoon. I did not seal the deal, as they say, for getting him out to Kansas City, but we planted a seed and we will continue to try to see if we can make that happen. But we got to spend about an hour together yesterday just talking about how he's doing, how I'm doing, family, life, and, of course, a lot of media conversation, a lot of political conversation as well with Bill. I did post a photo of the two of us yesterday after he had me over to his house on my Instagram, at Pete Mundo. You can see it there on my Instagram stories. Posted it on X as well. But that is where you can see that photo. A little selfie of Bill and I. He's got a beautiful spot overlooking the ocean. I mean, it is as prime time as it gets. He walks out of his backyard. He walks maybe 50 feet, and he's heading down a pretty steep staircase off the dunes to one of the most beautiful oceans in the world. So God bless him. He's lived the American dream, and I appreciate his friendship, what he's done for me personally, and all the times that he comes on KCMO and talks to this audience. Of course, his morning update runs at 7:15, and then at 8 p.m. every night you can hear the No Spin News here on KCMO. But one thing we talked about was Colbert's cancellation. Stephen Colbert, of course, is going to be done in 2026 with The Late Show. And the reality is the show was losing $40 million a year. The show became hyper-partisan, and when you're a comedian, and even though we're in a fragmented environment, when you're on CBS, you want to bring in the left, you want to bring in the right, you want to bring in the middle, you just want to be a comedian for all people. Everyone gets offended maybe once in a while, but that's what comedy is, or at least that's what comedy used to be. No more. But there's a conspiracy theory out there that this was done by Paramount, the parent company to CBS, because they're in the process of a merger. Skydance is poised to take over Paramount. And there's this belief that the Trump administration would not have gone forward with approving this purchase if Colbert was still on CBS's roster. That's absurd. That's a conspiracy theory. The notion that Donald Trump was trying to get rid of Stephen Colbert, Trump is the president of the United States. Okay, there are so many voices out there. And I think Stephen Colbert is going to get picked up somewhere. He may not get picked up somewhere that's paying him $15, $20 million a year, like at CBS, but he's going to get a gig. Like, trust me, Stephen Colbert is going to work if he wants to work. He'll be fine. He'll make money. It might not be the same money, but he'll make plenty of money doing something somewhere. The notion that Trump wanted Colbert to get fired to then have his administration approve this takeover of Paramount by Skydance is so far deep into the conspiratorial weeds that you must also be of the belief that we are going to get a treasure trove of information on these MLK files coming out. Epstein is right around the corner. JFK, you just wait. I mean, this is absurd. Now, Bill and I were talking about this yesterday, and the one thing he did bring up here is he goes, I think that Skydance basically told CBS, when this deal gets done, we're done with Colbert. And part of what he believes is the agreement between Skydance and CBS is that they would can Colbert, they would get rid of Colbert, so Skydance didn't have to do it right after they took over Paramount. Because that would be viewed as more political, and they didn't want to deal with those headaches. So they said to Paramount, the parent company of CBS, listen, guys, we want this deal to get done, obviously, and Paramount does too, but part of the deal is that you've got to get rid of Colbert, you've got to take the heat for that, and then we can move this deal forward. And that was Bill's theory, and that makes a lot more sense to me than this notion of CBS did this or Paramount did this to make sure the deal got done, which, of course, you need approval from the administration to get some of these major deals done. There's federal filings involved and everything else where these things have to end up getting approved, right? You often see these mergers and acquisitions get rejected. Biden did this a bunch with certain M&As. But the fact that, like, Trump needed a scalp of Stephen Colbert, Trump tweets about a lot of people, tweets about Rosie, tweets about Morning Joe. He's not obsessed with Colbert like he is some of these people. That is just looking to try to blame Trump for something when there's no evidence to suggest there's any there. But it's also par for the course for a lot of people. Washington Post wrote about Kansas City in the last couple of days. Headline, Kansas City poured millions into a grocery store. It still may close. They note about how KC's Sunfresh, right off Prospect, lost $885,000 last year, and they only have about 4,000 shoppers a week, down from 14,000 just a few years ago. So they wrote about this because there's this New York City mayor's race that, as I joked about last week, I think is getting too much attention outside of New York, but I get it. All the national media people are there. It impacts them. They want to talk about it as if it impacts all of us. Thankfully, it doesn't impact us in Kansas City. But the Democratic Socialist, Mamdani, who's the front runner in that race, has proposed the idea of government-run grocery stores, which is fantastic. If you love the way the post office operates, then you will love a government-run grocery store. But the Washington Post wrote about Kansas City, and they wrote about the Sunfresh, and they wrote about the fact that basically it's been an utter failure at 31st and Prospect. And I give them credit for writing it. However, there's been pushback on this over the last few days. Mayor Lucas responded to the piece in the Washington Post. He wrote here, this is a privately run grocery store on X, having gotten subsidies to get food in communities in need. We and New York City subsidize sports and luxury housing. I see no controversy expanding access to food and transit too. Talking about, the free bus fare and things like that. So basically, because we do a lot of other dumb things, we should do more dumb things. That's the attitude of big government. In a perfect world, Kansas City is not subsidizing sports teams. We've talked about this. Unfortunately, it seems like that is part of the game. No pun intended. Luxury housing, same deal. They've got to subsidize projects like Power and Light, which is still losing $15 million a year. Think about that. $15 million a year. Power and Light District loses. That's subsidized by you, the taxpayer. All the one light, the two light projects, all these different things that they're building, the big fancy apartments in Kansas City, they oftentimes get subsidized too. Developers make out like bandits. They do just fine. But the mayor's point is pretty clear. We do bad things with subsidies, therefore it's okay to do other bad things with subsidies. In a perfect world, you don't do any of this. But justifying bad behavior because of previous bad behavior, that's what my 4-year-old does. And to a lesser extent, my 6-year-old. And my 18-month-old will start doing that soon, too. Although she does it, she just doesn't realize she's doing it. But that's the problem that we've got right now. Defending this by saying we subsidize sports teams and luxury apartments isn't really a good defense. Patrick Tuohy, our buddy at the Show Me Institute, he was actually quoted in this piece in the Washington Post. And here's what they wrote about him. Patrick Tuohy has been critical of the Sunfresh project. He says the store looks great on paper, but does not have the demand to support it. Plus, he noted the neighborhood has other options because of a nearby Aldi store and the independent Happy Food Center. So if you look here, there is an Aldi right there at 38th and Prospect. So you've got an Aldi just a few blocks south that has very good Google reviews, I will add. I talked to a couple of people who had been in there, and they said it looks like every other Aldi that's out in the suburbs, except maybe they've got a T-shirt security guard there kind of monitoring the in and out of what's happening at that Aldi at 38th and Prospect. I mean, you can't tell me that it's a food desert when you go 8 blocks south and you've got an Aldi at 38th and Prospect. You can't tell me 31st and Prospect is a food desert when I go 8 blocks south and I've got an Aldi, which is, I mean, right up there with almost any other food store. Maybe you say there's not the quality on the high end, fine, whatever. But, you know, we shop at Aldi. There's plenty of great stuff you can get at Aldi for a family or no matter what you've got in your home. Aldi's plenty fine for the needs of anybody in Kansas City. So tying this back to what's going on in New York, they're like, hey, how's this idea of a publicly subsidized or government-run food store going to go? Let's look at Kansas City where it's been an absolute utter failure. Back here in Kansas City, the people that like it are like, well, you know, I mean, it's privately run. We're just dumping money into it. Okay. Either way, you've wasted $1 million on this operation. What's the point? What do you have to show for it? As much as I don't like subsidizing sports teams, at least you can say there's a civic pride element in having the Chiefs and the Royals here. And yes, there is obviously economic benefits when you talk about having games with, whether it's baseball, 81 games a year with 20, 30, 40,000 people at the games. And obviously the NFL, you've got 80,000 people at these games. You've got when TV crews come in. There are clear benefits you can point to, as much as I don't love the subsidy angle. You can't make the case for this Sunfresh. You can't, no matter how hard you try, you can't make the case. But so many want to and so many try to because it's just convenient for them to do it. The text line is 913-408-7957. Pete, the Aldi guard at 39th and Prospect is probably just making sure people don't think the grocery carts are for sale for 25 cents. If I wasn't remote, I'd give you a rim shot there on the text line. 5,000. That's very well done. That's outstanding work by you. 913-408-7957. Pete, I sent out a package through the Postal Service scheduled for delivery on the 12th. That was nearly 2 weeks ago, and it's still in transit. I can only imagine a grocery store delivered and run by the government. Yeah, we'll get in those bananas in about 3 days. 3 weeks later, you haven't seen a banana in the store. It is an absolutely horrible idea. And when you actually look at the margin, the profit margin for these grocery stores, I mean, the notion that big grocery is screwing over the little guy here, and they're gouging you for apples, and they're gouging you for sugar, that's not the business model for these grocery stores. They actually operate on pretty small margins. And if you have a successful Aldi at 39th and Prospect, just let that be the grocery store. Let that be the example for the neighborhood. And then maybe if the marketplace demands it, somebody will come in from the private sector and open up another one. Instead, we have a failure of a government-funded grocery store in Kansas City. Even if it's privately owned, it was partially government-funded, and it's on the verge of shutting down. They've got issues with homelessness. They've got issues with empty shelves. They have issues with just lack of product, and they don't have enough shoppers. And then what happens? Shoppers vote with their feet. That's why they go from 14,000 shoppers a week to now 4,000 shoppers a week. And there's nothing the government is going to do that's going to fix that. On the text line, Pete, maybe you can do an on-location show at Sun Market. Usually when we do an on-location show, it's tied into some sponsor. And I don't think that Sun Market's in the business right now to sponsor our show live on location. Unless the Aldi wants to sponsor our show from Sun Market. Maybe that's the direction to go. We'll reach out to Aldi. We'll have them sponsor our show from Sun Market, talk about what a piece of garbage it is, and then say, go to the Aldi 8 blocks south of here and have a great time and, shop to your heart's desire. Maybe that's the play. I'll reach out to sales about that coming up here after the show. We've got Tirade Tuesday in 20 minutes on KCMO Talk Radio. It is your chance to rant about whatever's on your mind. I may not be in studio, but I still want your best tirades. The segment is only as good as you make it. 913-408-7957. That Tirade Tuesday is coming up at the bottom of the hour. Coming up next, this Coldplay story keeps going viral, and I almost wanted to give the New York Times credit for something they wrote about it. How the shame coming out of the Coldplay viral video is something to celebrate. I don't think they're wrong, but their examples, of course, are completely and hyper-political. I'll explain it next on KCMO. I wanted to agree with this opinion piece in the New York Times and actually agree with the headline, but that's where my agreement ended. I saw the headline from the New York Times, and it was written by Helen Schulman. And I thought, wow, she's actually right. The Coldplay concert viral moment between the Astronomer CEO and the HR executive was a moment to actually celebrate because it did bring back shame to sin, which I think is a good thing, actually, societally and culturally. I actually agree with that headline. And I'm like, wait, are we going to get a piece from the New York Times that is well thought out? Are we going to get an opinion essay that actually is based in this idea of morality? Is that coming to the New York Times? And I was optimistic until I actually started reading it. And I was like, no, of course not, because they want to make it about Trump. Because, of course, they want to make it about Trump. Because everything in the New York Times orbit has to somehow tie back to Orange Man bad. But I really wanted them to just be like, no, we should be embarrassing people, or it's okay for people who are embarrassed on a global stage to feel shame. It's actually good. It's healthy for us to feel that shame when we end up screwing up as royally as Kristen Cabot and Andy Byron appeared to screw up, right? Like, that's healthy for us to be like, whoa, we got caught. We are way in the wrong. We are embarrassed. We are feeling shame. But instead, here's where the author decides to go with this in the New York Times. I thought that the toxic sludge of shamelessness, that love child of Donald Trump and the internet, had wiped out the old-fashioned notion of humiliation. But I was wrong. Kind of like when I thought we'd wipe out measles when the World Health Organization declared the disease eliminated in the U.S. in the year 2000. I never thought I'd be glad to see shame as a concept, at least brought back from the dead. But in the age of Trump, it's a strange relief to watch as two fellow citizens come to realize they have done something reckless and inappropriate and not pretend that they had nothing to hide. Instead, they did their best to disappear. I hope they will become sort of folk heroes in this age of utter shamelessness, when the House and the Senate vote for things that most Americans know are wrong, like cutting funding for Medicaid and food assistance programs. These leaders evidently don't care. Why? Because they're afraid of the president, or they just don't want to give up their tiny piece of power. Although I'll ask you, writes the author in the New York Times, just how powerful is a person who shamelessly follows Mr. Trump? Oh, God, there was such hope for this piece. There was hope for this piece in the New York Times titled, "The Coldplay Concert Shame is Something to Celebrate." But not for the reasons this author wanted to make it a celebration. This author basically was premising that Donald Trump has no shame for anything, which I actually may give you that to a certain extent. I may. There's no doubt about it. We are in an era where politicians never apologize. From Donald Trump down to Quentin Lucas. I have asked Quentin Lucas if he regrets multiple things he's done during his time in office, and he has never said yes. At least not that I can think of, whether it's, police funding, Sunfresh grocery stores. I have asked him, hey, do you regret X, Y, or Z? I can't think of a time in 5.5 years of weekly conversations he ever said, yeah, I screwed that one up. Yeah, I messed that up. Because we are in an era on the left and the right where politicians do not admit that they screwed something up. It's not popular to admit that they screwed something up. I do think that trend will reverse itself. I think we're going to yearn for a time when politicians are more human about admitting their mistakes. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that day will come. But this notion that the Coldplay concert goers who got busted apparently, allegedly, having this affair, and that somehow it ties into Donald Trump and the big, beautiful bill and how Republicans have no shame is not the direction I thought it was going to go. And maybe shame on me for thinking that the New York Times would take it in a direction of like morality and having shame for committing sin and things like that. But of course it was just about politics and blaming Republicans for everything, because why not when you're the New York Times? But you tell me, who's the politician right now? Because they just wanted to make it about Trump. But who's the politician right now on the left or the right? Who's that person who's like, I got this wrong, I'm learning from that, I'm trying to be different in this way. Who does that today? That politician does not exist. The Democrats don't have that politician. The Republicans don't have that politician. To make this exclusively about one person in one side of the political aisle is not telling the entire story. You may say that Trump ushered that in, but I would say it predates him. Obama was the same way. Was there ever a moment when Obama said, I got that wrong? No. I mean, the last major political figure who kind of had some humility and some ability to kind of goof on themselves was probably George W. Bush. And I'm not saying he was a great president, but he knew how to make fun of himself. Obama, forget it. Trump, not really. And all the other political leaders right now, I mean, look at Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's out there doing these interviews the last couple of days. I can't play him on the air because he dropped 30 F-bombs in a 60-second clip. I didn't want to put that on Garner, who's filling in for Mark Van Sickle this week because Mark's on the set of Ted Lasso. And by the way, Mark's going to be on the show in about 25 minutes, so hang tight. Mark's going to call in and give us an update as an extra on the Ted Lasso filming this week. But I didn't want to put that on Garner to try to beep out 30 F-bombs in 30 seconds. But Hunter Biden's blaming everybody but Joe for how last year went for his father. This is what's happening right now in American politics. It's on both sides of the political aisle. So while, yes, this Coldplay concert viral moment should be embraced because I'm fine with people having shame around sinful decisions. I think that's healthy for culture. I think that's healthy for all of us individually to have those moments. You can't possibly, in good faith, put it at the feet of Donald Trump unless you are so blinded by your politics and so blinded by your partisanship that you see everything through that lens of Orange Man Bad.